Welcome to the Industrial Athletic Trainers Society VNS On Demand. We are excited to share with you value-added continue education programs. Stick around at the end, or check the video description for more details on how members can claim their CU credits.
Again, good morning. Thank you all for being here. Today we have Lucas Bianco with us. He's currently providing injury prevention services to employees at a manufacturing site. In this role, he's able to care for the whole individual from mind to body. Prior to this position, he served as an athletic trainer in intercollegiate sports for 10 years. Currently, Lucas works in the manufacturing setting and is fortunate to work with the IHS leadership as part of the marketing team. Please consider becoming a member. He is using ergonomic software to support changes at the site he provides services, as well as promote ergonomic diagnostics among the employees he works with. So welcome, Lucas. Thank you so much for your time today, and you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, everybody who jumped on to be along on this journey down the yellow brick road, right? So you're going to get a lot of those. Morgan is doing a great job as a moderator and has been super involved in all of VNS. So if you get a chance or know her already, just make sure you say great job and thank you very much. I will try my best to go through this presentation with, again, a little bit of Wicked, a lot of ergonomics, a little bit more of biomechanical analysis, a little bit more into like clinical practice and how do we use some of the things that we know from ergonomics and we know from maybe how we provide care to help guide our early intervention. And I will continually tell you the goals of this program because I want it to be successful and I want to do a good job and I want you to learn something, hopefully. All right, so thanks for giving me the platform, IATS, to provide this AT perspective in the industrial setting. Got a good introduction from Morgan. Thank you, Morgan. I just want to share too that I do work for Biokinetics as a prevention program manager. And we are doing a lot of the AI-assisted video analysis that gets you some of the ergonomic stuff. That's not going to be the main focus, but it's just interesting and cool to me that we're tapping into those ideas more and more as a athletic training profession. If you want a real ergonomics and human factors presentation, then you have to go to Canada tomorrow. The International Ergonomics and Humans Factors in Healthcare organization, society will be presenting. So then I would ask that you go up to do that. This is not going to be strictly ergonomics. It's going to focus more again on the clinical perspective, early intervention, how to tap in through your history, through your evaluation skills, using your skills as an athletic trainer and then tying them back into an ergonomist and using that together. And then recognize that we are not in Kansas anymore because we're virtual. Instruction was good. All right. Are people born wicked or do they have wickedness thrust upon them? For us, we're asking, are people born with overuse injuries or do they work in poor ergonomic environments? And then here you have the picture of the individual holding the small human there, that child probably with purple socks. You have slides, maybe the first two there from left are going to be ideal or more ideal for hip, shoulder posture. And then you could see like the lateral hip shift. So you can start recognizing some of the things that may or may not lead. They could be risk factors. And what we're going to look at is what are those risk factors and then how do we learn from them and how do we understand them from the person we're working with to maybe tap into something that they don't know that they're doing to maybe find out why some of their persistent or underlying symptoms are still there, even though they've done things to maybe change them in the past. And then Alphaba over there is with the nanny bear, right? Dulce bear, I think. So I'm working on my wicked stuff too. All right, challenge yourself here to put yourself on the scale from wizard to wicked witch, and imagine, right? If you're more of a wizard right now, that means you have like a good background of ergonomics. Maybe you have some tools in place. You're able to use those and maybe shield maybe your own clinical practice because you can use that stuff, right? So you've done a good job understanding ergonomics. Versus the other side, maybe you feel like you have almost magical clinical skills, but you're not really sure how ergonomics ties back into that, right? So that's kind of the thought process. So score yourself on the WEMAS if you are more organizationally gifted or magically gifted. And then here's your outline. So using ergonomics in your clinical practice, exploring how ergonomic-based history can uncover mechanisms of injury, implementing an ergonomics MSD prevention program, examples based on the Wizard of Oz of some of these underlying movement risk behaviors that could lead to issues, and then clinical practice wizardry examples. There's also some stuff from social media that I just pulled for fun because I think it's good to look at that stuff too. Here's your objectives for CEU credit and going through the BOC type of stuff, right? So we want you to comprehend, we want you to gather, we want you to foster, we want you to illuminate, and all of these will be touched on throughout. So you can read those and see what we're gonna comprehend and then gather and then foster and work towards, again, illuminating to those we work with how specific ergonomic biomechanical changes can alleviate symptoms to make a large effect from a small change. Then you're getting closer to ergonomic wizardry. Different types of ergonomics. This is from the International Ergonomics Association, physical ergonomics, cognitive ergonomics, organizational ergonomics. So hopefully throughout there's lots of ideas and thoughts and maybe things you've heard before or maybe heard less before and now you're hearing them again. I hope this is one of them. This is very meaningful to me, right? I feel like we get siloed platforms stuck in physical ergonomics. I really think we need to explore where cognitive ergonomics works into things. And then of course, organizational ergonomics is how we get into tying into management and working through bigger problems, right? So I just think it's important to consider all of those. Again, a lot of the things here will focus on physical, we'll get a little bit into cognitive ideas, but the real goal, right, as we keep getting athletic trainers further into the industrial setting and working through positions and into safety roles, changing the organizational ergonomics culture. All right, some of the differences. This is the stuff that we are gathering, maybe. Ergonomics is applied.
Really quick.
Yep, sorry.
Can you hit hide at the bottom? I just don't want anyone to miss any of your hits. Thank you.
I didn't know that showed up. Thank you. Ergonomics, applied science, concerned with designing and arranging things people use so that people and things interact most efficiently and safely. I thought that was a pretty good one. The one that OSHA shares is making the work environment fit the employee versus making the employee fit the work environment. Anthropometrics is the systematic measurement of physical properties of the human body. So this is like the slides of how far out you reach and then where that different percentages of how much you're supposed to be reaching or not supposed to be reaching, how long your arms are can dictate that. And then biomechanics is again biological systems and how they move, and then commonly associated with human locomotion and exercise. So most likely, right, or you have that background at least, and then you're transitioning it or using it through your ergonomics background, basing it on the work environment that you're working in. And then I'm going to ask you to expand your biomechanical analysis, your ergonomics analysis to their everyday activities. And then specifically in this one, some of the movements in Wicked, and then maybe some of the movements that they do at work that aren't part of what a traditional ergonomic assessment might be, such as what they're wearing or how they utilize the space to get to where they work. OSHA ergonomics. Again, if you want to go through, just stay with what OSHA tells you to do and focus on OSHA. It's focused on a lot of prevention, again, mostly physical in nature. I want to talk physical ergonomics, but they continually tell you how many work-related MSDs are frequently reported as causes of lost or restricted time based on ergonomic issues. So there's a big area for this to still benefit employees, and OSHA recognizes that, but they're maybe minimal in how much they provide guidance on how to do it. Here is their process. If you go to the OSHA ergonomics website, you can go through these steps. I feel like number 4, and then encourage early reporting ties into like early intervention in my mind. That's where I think we fit the best. Whereas OSHA is trying to go more strictly prevention. I feel like we can expand prevention into that early intervention realm and do some fun stuff there once we learn maybe why or how their ergonomics could be affecting their body. All right, here's a fun one. Ergonomics assessments and pain. So this is from Chazin. Individuals, workers, employees with pain in the past 7 days had an increased perception of their office workspace ergonomics, meaning they were saying that it was more dangerous or more of a risk factors, higher risk factors compared to what an ergonomics expert was saying. I think that's a great plot twist or idea of how cognitive versus physical ergonomics could be blending or working together there. So when you're talking with someone and taking in their history and they're telling you all the things that could have caused their issue, they're probably more aware of that right now based on this research because they just bothered or hurt themselves, irritated themselves, caused discomfort. So just consider that as you're taking through your history when they're telling me, oh yeah, they don't have an ergonomic mouse, and that's probably why they have carpal tunnel syndrome. That might be what their mindset is. So we have to take that in, listen with that, but then we also have to take it with a grain of salt, understanding that they're going to give us more than what a normal ergonomic assessment might give us. If you are looking for more ergonomic evaluation skills, things like that, there is a link here that you can click on, I think, maybe somehow. I don't know how. Maybe I'll share that as well. But that's through North Carolina State University, and they have just a whole website that just gives you some of the different techniques that are out there, assessments that are out there, like the Rogers muscle fatigue analysis. This is one that I was going through when I was looking up all the different ones that are out there, the Nashi and all those fun things. This is the one that I just kind of attached to at the time. So I put it up here as a reminder of one that we can utilize. Most of the time we see overuse injuries as this guy, right? Good for him. I'm glad he got on this poster. And we think about them as being long-term. We think about symptoms of overuse injuries, and we think of how they commonly happen. And a lot of times we get to like stress fractures, and I just think comparing the athletic idea of overuse injuries to maybe the industrial or manufacturing areas that we work, similar and different. I think just being able to consider that. Not all mechanisms are going to be as obvious as this. So I think that's a good one. Consider that. Here you go. Paths of pathological. Early intervention and prevention are going to be on the same path as far as they're going to have some discomfort. They're going to have some feelings that they're tight or stiff or all those fun things. And you can get to that early, and that's in your early intervention approach. And that's when you can maybe start understanding some of the ergonomics that led to that. Or you can do it before they have these issues, and then you're doing more of a prevention approach. And again, I think the magic part happens when we can be doing the prevention already, but then also hear and learn what's going on with the specific individuals and then bring it back around, right? And I think that's hopefully what you're going to take away from this. So here you go. We got 3 different conditions and then 3 different likelihood ratios, which we'll use later as well. And the first one's lateral epicondylosis. So we're talking about elbow, forearm discomfort. The most common group in this study was 20% of assembly line workers, which makes you think, again, maybe more of that repetitive motion, which a lot of times we associate it with. But the highest quality of evidence with the highest odds ratio was actually strain index. So another ergonomic assessment that's out there, but how much force they're utilizing to move through that extension pattern or moment. And then the forearm rotation of greater than 4 hours a day was another one. So again, if you can get these and put these in the back of your head, and then when they're telling you their history and they're talking about some of the movements that they do, and then you're not only asking about their job, but you're starting to ask about opening the door on the way to their job. And then you can start remembering and understanding that maybe there's a strain index there. Maybe that door's stuck. And then we start thinking about some of those other things that are going on. That's again where we break that line and start getting into alpha magic areas. Another meta-analysis. Here we go. Degenerative meniscal conditions. So we talk about here high quality of evidence of 1 hour work-related kneeling or squatting with the odds ratio of 2.69. I think odds ratios are really fun here and a good way to start exploring, again, the likelihood that these things happen to individuals that are doing these tasks, right? So these are fun ideas to consider. Climbing greater than 30 steps of stairs, also high odds ratio and pretty high quality of evidence, meaning it was coming from randomized controlled trials. And then sitting, driving, they were less high quality, lower quality evidence that showed lower odds ratios. So those were not as associated with meniscal conditions. So again, you can be utilizing this in the background in your mind when you're working behind your curtain through your evaluation. And these are all the odds ratios I want you to be putting in the back of your head as we get to the clinical practice part. Now we talk about wrist posture for carpal tunnel, and we talk about repetitive and force movements, right? And then we recognize that just computer use and just vibration are not necessarily associated with higher risk factors, right? So more for the 2.7 odds ratio of wrist posture, what position their wrist is in, than just using they were on a computer. And again, I think that's because more people are using computers now, so it's less that just using the computer is the issue, but it's how you're using the computer and how you're putting yourself as far as wrist posture and then repetition and force. All right, some ADLs that that can lead to issues, right? So I think the one I like to attach to here is handedness when we're using utensils, like eating. A lot of times people don't use their left hand at all to eat. Using your right hand, pouring milk, right? We could talk about de Quervain's disease syndrome stuff happening, right? To thumb and hand. So you can be tying some of these activities of daily living. And I want you to have these again in your background, hopefully from this presentation, that you can use when you go to talk to someone who's maybe giving you an idea that makes you think, okay, well, it's probably this job task. It's 100% this job task, and likelihood ratios are pointing that way, but then they go do it and that doesn't hurt them. So then we have to start looking at some of the other things maybe, and then considering how it's not just about risk factors, it's about how they attach to the risk factor a little bit. Here's some fun ones. This is like the medical side of things, right? But glute amnesia syndrome, I don't know how many have talked to people about that, but I just did a whole education on that for one of our groups. I started by coming in the room and I just said, wake your butts up, right? And then we got up and start moving. So there you go. That was waking you guys up if you weren't awake right now. Upper cross syndrome, excessive kyphosis, forward head posture, flared rib cage. I mean, just look at all this stuff that we can be pointing out and thinking about. So again, good list just to have in the background of your head. And then if you're in the Wizard of Oz world, starting your journey on the Olympic Road, sitting in class, they do that a lot of Wicked. And then dancing, singing, roommate relationships, poppy related fatigue. That's a real thing there. Putting on ruby red slippers, right? That can be challenging sometimes. Flying a hot air balloon. Think about the angle of that, right? And where you have to be pulling from. Defying gravity, that's probably hard. And then fighting flying monkeys. So this is probably a good spot for this slide. OSHA's list, not as inclusive. That's all they have on their website, right? Of OSHA list of ergonomic related conditions. Now tendonitis covers a lot of things, right? But think about where they're looking or where they're training safety professionals to look maybe, and where we can look. And that's, again, how we can break down some of the barriers and get into a little bit more of a magical realm of our treatment, care, how you want to associate that. History, here we go. So there's a lot of good research about history being the most common, least expensive, and least invasive diagnostic tool. Our ability to listen and not waiting to talk during a history is super valuable. So if you just take that into your next history, that'll probably change your approach a little bit, right? We don't want to be thinking, okay, I know the answer, I'm going to tell you what's going on with you. We want to be listening for them to tell us the answer a little bit more. Mechanism of injury, considering persistent conditions, talking about overuse. We're going to say that a lot of times it's a blend of a risk factor and maybe an early intervention type of issue. Ergonomic risk factor is one of the questions that you can ask during a history, right? That's been shown in the literature to at least get people to expand pretty well. Would be, are there aspects of your job do you believe are unhealthy? I know specifically at BioConnects, it's one of the questions that we have individuals always kind of asking for the most part. And I didn't know there was any support behind it, but this is from a occupational medical history. And this is one that got a lot of significant data, right? Where they were saying that they found this, and then the clinicians were also reporting that they also saw these issues. So when someone tells you that their job is unhealthy or has unhealthy aspects, they're probably telling you an accurate or a significant data. So that might be a good point to ask during your history to kind of get some of that light shed on some of those areas. Do you get tired from all the skipping on the yellow brick road? That might be a little bit more specific to wicked ideas. Are you fatigued from dancing through life? All right, persistent symptoms. So let's start seeing patterns. Let's start recognizing when they're telling us that their hip's tight, and then they have sciatica or lower leg, numbness, tingling stuff, and then their hip's tight again. And let's start like figuring out probably what's actually happening instead of just stringing them along. That's what a RCA is going to get us to. And then I'm just getting old. I know I hear that a lot in the industrial setting, and it makes me upset mostly when I hear it, because I feel like it's just kind of like a way to not approach the issues. It's just a way to say that you don't want to. Just throwing this back out there, make sure you're understanding first aid and the changes in how first aid is working. Make sure that you know that your history might make things look more work-related or more life-related based on how you do them. And then that might change recordability and all that fun stuff. So just a disclaimer to keep that in your head. All right. Those who don't know their patient's history are destined to repeat it. It's not actually by Edmund Burke. His is without their patients. But just think about this quote, right? Those who don't know history are destined to repeat it. That quote itself has been pushed towards Winston Churchill a lot, because people didn't go back and like reevaluate who said it. They didn't actually look at that. They just looked at the quote from someone else stating it was Winston Churchill, but it's actually Edmund Burke. So I think that's like a fun little example there of like, do your research and like, don't take everything I'm saying or anybody's saying throughout these things. Go back and look at some of this stuff and evaluate where you can use these skills in your practice. All right, diagnostic history, powerful tool. We're going to get into some likelihood ratios here. So the probability that an event such as a symptom in a diseased patient person can occur versus the same event happening in a non-diseased individual, right? So then the amount of times more or less that a result can happen, right? That's going to be that one. And then Bayes' theorem, this is here. So the goal here, like, again, like we're trying to do the magic, we're trying to be behind the curtain a little bit. These are the things that are going to help make it more clear to you what's going on with someone. If you can start understanding the likelihood that they have lateral epicondylitis, and then you understand your probability, right, of this happening, then you can understand now you have new evidence of maybe another question that you asked and then an answer that they gave you. And now you can get closer to what the posterior or the put out of the probability is. And now we know, like, I can be, 95% sure, right? The best clinicians know what's going on right after the history. And it's because they utilize these skills. They just don't know that they're using them. Root cause analysis, I think really valuable, again, thinking about the organizational part of ergonomics, because root cause analysis is something that's happening throughout all of industrial settings from a safety perspective. But a root cause analysis is pretty much, in my mind, what we do every time we do a evaluation or an ergonomic assessment. And the big thing here is that this is the way you can solve or address the root of an issue instead of just treating the smaller symptoms. And they do it with like fires or times that people run into things with a toe motor, but we can do it with the body, and we can start recognizing that if they keep having the same knee issue, then there's probably a bigger issue happening. And we can go from that individualized approach to a global approach and then change it for someone else from a prevention as we just started the early intervention with that individual. And that's what this messes around with. This is like a fun one from Mac Donald. He had a farm, I think. Workplace factors, right? And individual factors are a poor match. And then how they affect the person are completely individualized, right? So when we try to just lump people into your assembly line worker, so you're going to have lateral epicondylosis, then that's where we start to go maybe misguided a little bit in how we approach and treat people. And that's what I want us to recognize. You can have all this in the background, but you still have to listen. You still have to use your history to get to that individualized to global prevention, perception, use risk factors, get some on-site data, and then eventually what you're going to do is you're going to develop your own practice-based evidence that you're going to be able to use these metrics. Now, you might not actually keep track of them and score them the way that I'm telling you to do or share with you, but you're going to have it in the back of your head that, oh, I know what's going on here. I know what small little change I can make to help modify them and give them large changes so that their life is better, right? And then again, that's where you're getting closer to a ergonomic wizardry approach. All right, popular. Should be popular, So posture right here, right? We could see changes in posture in Wicked from maybe the good witch to the bad witch. Specifically with Elphaba, I think fun one here when she's wearing the hat, changes in the hat. So thinking about when we're working with people and they have different types of safety glasses that they utilize, the ones that go over your glasses or under your glasses, or hats maybe that are off tilted or way more or change center of gravity type stuff, right? So that's a fun one, tools of trade. I was trying to connect what we see in Wicked and then what you might see out in the field. So let's consider some of those things. What uniform, belts, right? Shoes, of course. How are all of those affecting somebody ergonomically? That's part of your history, part of your evaluation. Power poses. So again, Galinda does a great job throughout most of it to be right, that open, that power pose. In the office, when you're walking by and you're seeing people going through these different types of power poses, the lower ones being a lower power versus a higher power, do we connect to, okay, well, they already have an issue, so that's why that's changing their power poses? Or do we think, okay, their power poses are creating or developing their symptoms or issues? That kind of stuff. That's what I want you to be thinking about there. Fight or flight, yeah, if you're not getting into, again, cognitive ergonomics, if you're not thinking about maybe line workers working from height and how much stress is on their body normally just from looking down. Now, even if they don't feel stress or they are not afraid of being in those positions, there's still a reaction that occurs. So for a second or a split second, their body might engage in some form of a muscle guarding position. So that might explain some of their hip flexor tightness. That might explain from some of their trap tightness, right? Levator scapulae might get some amahyoid stuff. And these are all fun ones to explore with them and ask them how they feel when they're doing their jobs. Or conflict resolution is another idea here, right? So I just got moved into a new management role, and how does that change? Now I have to go to this meeting every day and present data. So I'm having an elevated heart rate, and then that's changing my breathing rate. And then that's getting me to rib flare, right? So we could tie those things back together. That's how I want you to think through, again, your magical assessment. Fun one here in my mind, right? Fast to self-selected speed effect on knee extension and low back extension moments from when you're getting up. So they had people sit down, normal office workers or occupational workers sitting, and then they said, okay, get up at your own speed to go get that glass of water. And then they had them go get that glass of water, ready, go. And they like blew a whistle. And the people who were told to do it at a faster rate had an increase in those muscle productions of force, right? So now think about how that can tie into when people are getting up and then they have to go work on, in my mind, a paper mill break, or maybe you have like a machine goes out of whack and they're sitting and they're comfortable and this is their 15-minute break or chance to have a little bit of a break. And then they sprint out of there. And then later that afternoon, they tell you that, you know, this is bothering me, this is bothering me. They might not be able to connect it back to that, but you could ask, was there a time today that we had an upset condition, or was there an area that you needed to do something quicker than you were planning on doing it? And that's kind of how you can tie into some of those. Again, all right, don't talk down to people. I think this is what this is trying to get us to, is the scarecrow has no brain, right? We might be the expert of the body, but they are the expert of their body. And a lot of times we're hoping to connect their brain, their mindfulness, their awareness to what we're seeing or understanding. And that can be difficult and that can be challenging. But I talk later about some ways to do that. But just know that they are the expert of their body and give them that credit, please. All right. Sometimes it's really easy to get back to Kansas. Sometimes it's really easy to not have issues anymore. And sometimes people just don't want to hear that, right? Like, I think if we told Dorothy at the beginning that she could just click her heels 3 times and the movie would be shorter, right? But then she doesn't get to experience all that stuff. So sometimes people are on a journey Your role might be to learn from that individual, but recognize that just because you know the answer or you know how to help them, they might not always be looking for that help. Might be looking for a different type of help. Imposter syndrome. This is a fun one. Again, you moved into a new management role, or you just maybe are working with a group that you're not used to working with, or you got put on a new mechanic shift and you're working with new people, and you might be pretending to be someone you're not. You can get elevated cortisol levels, you can get somatic pain, you can get insomnia and loss of appetite. I think these are fun things to just consider or be aware of, again, as we're working with individuals. All right, don't let people be the scapegoat. Bring them in. Recognize that 25% of the people that you work with are going to jump right into this idea. They're going to ask you for ergonomic assessments. They're going to ask you to dive into their root causes and try to find their issues. And then 50% are going to be on the fence. They're not going to be sure quite like what you're saying or how you're presenting it. And then 25 are just never going to see that what you're going to do is helping them. And if you can change that 50% to make, right, 40% of that, 30% of that go to you, then you're going to be in a great spot. But you don't always have to work on the 25%. Here's some examples that I had through my clinical practice that I, consider wizardry, I guess, or whatever. So we're talking about kneeling with an individual because he does a job where he does a lot of kneeling. He's not in roofing, but this study talks about roofing and the idea of how much knee pads help because they change the angle of the knee, not just the decreasing contact stress. So I talk with this person about adding a knee pad. They start adding a knee pad. They still aren't getting past their, patella tendinopathy issue, maybe, if that's what we want to call it, something like that, classification. They've also had weight gain. They do a lot of squatting at work. So there's a lot of risk factors that could be there. But as we keep developing our history, we keep talking through it, they connect it back to a trip from a concert that they went to with friends and they were forced. That was like a key word, right? One of those words that when they shared it, you could see a visceral reaction or feel a visceral reaction. They had to sit in the back of the car. So like the trunk of the car right now, I don't think they were closed in the trunk, but they were like in the way back. I think like a station wagon almost type thing. And they were in a hyperflex position for almost 3 hours. So once we were able to recognize that that was closer to where they were, we changed our treatment program to go away from more biomechanical changes. And we tried to almost do positional release holds and get them into those hyperflex positions and get them out and allow them to have more comfort in those and recognize that that's probably what caused their issue less than what they're doing at work all the time. So that's going to be one of those ones that the person doesn't seem they're getting better. They don't think what we're doing is helping them. And then we maybe reevaluate our history. We get further back. We get closer to that root. That's what I want you to glean from this. Neck tightness. It's probably a good one too. If you are utilizing 2 screens like this individual was, and your emails are always dinging or always going off, or Morgan when she's letting people into this presentation and she keeps hearing that, and she keeps having to press that button. If we keep going left, we can start seeing this neck tightness develop. And then there's like some fun stuff here from Richter about how focus levels of our eyes ties back into our superior coccolaris, into our visual cortex. And then that changes our motor commands of our upper trapezius muscles and our scalenes to help us with that rotation pattern and getting into our sternocleidomastoid. And like that kind of stuff, you might not be able to express all this to the individuals you're working with, right? But if you can start understanding how some of these things work, and then you can pitch it or explain it as, well, your eyes are connected to your muscles because your muscles help move your eyes and your eyes move your muscles, right? So if you are doing that same movement pattern all day, this twitch is happening there. So it's almost like you're working out that muscle just from moving your eyes. How do we change your workstation? How do we reposition your body to help you take off that load, along with some of the different techniques that we're going to do maybe to decrease our visual motor cortex load. So that's what we did with that individual. Lunchbox, again, just like, I don't know, silly things in my head maybe, right? Biceps tendinalgia, biceps tightness, discomfort, not getting better. Always would put his lunchbox in the passenger side, like right next to him. Now, lunchboxes at a lot of manufacturing mills or places, right? They're huge, right? So they're 15 to 25 pounds. So not only this, but consider when people are walking in and out with these, you talk about lateral weight shifts and all that fun stuff. But this person's lifting it out each day. So he's going across, he's reaching across his truck, which probably elevated, it was pretty high, I think. And then he's lifting it out. So he's almost doing an eccentric, isometric biceps load every single time. So that's possible that that's part of what's going on there. So we started, hey, can you just put it in the back seat maybe? And then you can walk around and get it from there, or open that door that's behind you versus reaching across. And now you can just pull it out that way. And then you can start seeing maybe like that last little bit, like he was getting better already with what we were doing, but maybe this is that next step. This is that magical one. Oh, like, how did you know to think about those things? That's what I want you to have from this presentation. How do you think about those other things that could be affecting people? Glute ankle instability. So lateral lab shift. So they were like in this position, sitting all day on one of those like lab stools type of things, and they kept shifting to their right. They were starting to have plantar fascia pain and then lower leg muscle pain. This individual was maybe working on their hip first, and then they were working on their plantar fascia or like foot, and then back to their lower leg. And then it kind of happened again until we started to go into the office or see where they were, right? And find out that the steps going in there was actually one that was not I don't remember, 12 inches. Tommy, you can tell me if I'm wrong. 8 inches? 8 inches. How high it is. So one was off. So every time they were taking like their last step in, going into this old building where the lab was, they were offsetting. They were kind of like throwing their hips out on that last step, and then they were going in and sitting on it that way. So now, is that all 100% why this happened? Probably not, but this is part of the storytelling. This is part of the understanding of how things could be affecting that individual. And once we changed it, or maybe just the time that we spent with them evaluating their ergonomics or evaluating how what they were doing could affect their body, they at least felt that we cared a lot. And again, that might be part of this too. So how do you explain this? How do you present this to people? You can definitely start with the biomechanical analysis. You can get into some psychosomatic and understand like safety climates, and then decision authority, like how much they have to say in their job versus their physical demands. And then you can get into some mental health issues as far as like, have they dealt with anxiety, depression, disorder, things like that. And then maybe you can say like, when you're in those states, that can lead you to have changes in your body and how your body feels. And it's all connected. And the more we can allow them to expand on that themselves and learn that themselves, the more we might be helping them. And then storytelling, right? So I just did it for you, right? I tried to tie into Wicked as far as I could, but also I gave you examples of what I've done in my own practice and told you kind of how they work into a story. Don't want to wait till part 2, right? If you're into the movies, then you could go defy gravity right now by getting into some of what Cal State Berkeley talks about with athletic trainers and ergonomics. So there's a link in there. They have a whole master's degree that's focused on ergonomics, but more from the athletic training perspective. So it's not just the assessments, and it's not just measuring things and evaluating stuff that way, but it's tying it back into how you practice clinically. And again, that's kind of what I wanted you to see or learn from here. Here you go, social media examples. This was an individual who's a cleaner. She does cleaning. And this is, again, I just took this off of LinkedIn or whatever. But elevated or depressed shoulders, right? And then first visit of just adding like a stretch, and then how much they were able to maintain it. So this is like fun for what we maybe are doing now clinically, but then the magic would be, how do we make it so this person doesn't go back to that red, right? How can we tap into that early intervention to understand what ergonomics are putting them in this position? And then understanding now from like the individual to the global perspective, can we change that for everybody else before it happens? Or can we change it for everybody once it starts to happen, right? And can we have those things set up? That would be pretty cool. This is really fun. I think she does a really good job. Miss Taylor, I don't know if anybody watches or looks at her stuff, but this was someone who was having discomfort and pain, and she got it back to their head turning and their glasses, putting pressure on like kind of, I mean, it's above occiput, but like muscle attachments of almost cellular process, a little bit above that too. But I don't know. But she was saying that this person felt a lot better when he stopped having his glasses there and he was turning into them through his golf swing. I think it was golf. So if this can affect somebody and change how their back feels, then of course safety glasses are going to change people. Of course hard hats. Of course tying into like if they button all the way up or button 2 down, or like just start evaluating some of those things if this can change people, right? Or at least like consider it on the ones that are maybe more challenging cases. And then I think this is a fun one. I didn't do the video because I don't want to mess up videos, but this guy throws these in super quick. He's doing it really fast, really well. He does a great job. But like the ergonomics people out there are saying like, well, he's got to change this because it's too much of a risk factor. And I think, again, like individualized to global approach, like it might be a risk factor, but that doesn't mean that he can't do it. It just means he has to be aware that it's a higher risk factor. And I think that's how, again, we can listen to people. And instead of just assuming like, of course your back hurts or you're doing a lot of trunk rotation here, we could start evaluating like, well, and maybe they come in with, you know, a neck issue, and you could start evaluating a different part of the kinetic chain with that individual instead of just, again, assuming that this is going to hurt them because they're doing such a challenging task. Okay. And then no one warns the wicked. Remember that this is a job and a career. I think if you lose sight of that ever, you'll probably think you're too serious. Try not to be too serious. Adding ergonomic knowledge base to what you already understand as an athletic trainer can expand on your skills in the industrial setting. Hopefully that's what you're going to be able to do from this. And then minor targeted adjustments in ergonomics or activities of daily living, understanding how to share that back to the individual through storytelling or maybe through a biomechanical lens, however you do that, can have a large impact. And then you can as well become an ergonomic wizard. Oh, I need to share that with you. And I went, Morgan can talk, but thank you very much. I really appreciate you letting me talk about something that I do every day and I really like doing. And I hope you got some ideas in there, and the slides are available so you'll be able to go back and mess through some of this stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lucas. Michael did have that question about the slides, so you answered that right there. That's perfect. That was the only question currently in the chat. Some good conversation in there about all the awesome things that you touched on today. Does anyone have any other questions they'd like to ask Lucas before we kind of wrap up and head to the next session? You can feel free to put it in the chat and I can read it off. Maggie, yes, please. Maggie, if you want to come off mute, you are more than welcome to. Oh, you're good. No worries. I will mention before people pop off here, the VNS code that Lucas has shared is Fathom. So please make sure you're participating in that challenge this week as well. It's available in the access guide, the attendee guide that you got at the beginning of the week. So please check that out. And again, you can feel free to ask questions. We'll hang out here for a few more minutes. And if you don't have any questions, you can feel free to take a little lunch break. It's at least lunch for us in Central Time. So you can take a little lunch break and get ready for the next set of speakers. You're getting lots of comments in the chat, Lucas. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, not if I have this slide up, but I will look before we leave. Thank you for comments, maybe.
No, they're great.
Okay.
You did a phenomenal job. It was amazing.
Awesome.
Morgan, I do have a question.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Can you explain these code things? Because I'm totally missing this.
You're good. Yes. So in the attendee guide that you got in your email this week, there is a page that has the challenge on it. It'll have like a trophy in the left side, and there's a link that you can click on that trophy. It's kind of embedded, so you might not see it unless you're scrolling on it. You can click that and there's a form to fill out. And so if you collect all of the CEU codes today, there's a couple other challenges on there as well. You can put those codes in there, submit once, because we're not going to add them all together if you submit multiple. But if you put all your codes in there as you collect them today and submit that, you can win an incredible grand prize. And it's also in Discord in the announcements. It's pinned to the top of that chat, in the announcements chat as well. So lots of good stuff. Each of the job fair sponsors have a code if you want to chat with any of them and network with them. They have codes. And I'm losing track of what else is on there, but there's lots of good stuff that you can do throughout today to get as many points as you can. Everything's kind of given points differently, but they'll all be added up once you submit that form. Hopefully
Thank
that
you.
helps.
I appreciate that. I have read this and have still missed it. I read the announcement and have still missed it multiple times. So I appreciate that so much.
You're good. There's a lot going on this week.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Lucas, are there any other? Oh, go ahead, Kristen.
Lucas, can you just kind of talk a little bit more, just kind of how you got more involved in this type of like area of ergonomics? Just kind of how you got your beginning, whether it was like the company, but like what kind of what led you to this area of interest within the industrial setting?
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Kristen. Appreciate you being here and asking a question. I would say that, yes. So at Biokinetics, or the company I work for, I'm sure a lot of the companies, they have a little bit of a realm of ergonomics in there. And then recently, we've really kind of dived in to see what athletic trainers can do to add to an ergonomic perspective. And then for me personally, it was, I'm already doing this assessment. I'm already doing this evaluation. Why would I not think about it from this individualized approach and focus on this individual and help them, right, with all of my power to understand what's going on? But then maybe how do I share that back out to the rest of the individuals who are working in similar or maybe just around similar tasks? So I think that's how I kind of got into this realm of ergonomics.
Are there any projects that you've been able to work on personally, Lucas, that are kind of like the ones with like the golf guy that had the sunglasses? Have you run across any of those personally? Or was that just a story? I know you found that one on LinkedIn, but.
Yeah, so the ones before those were ones that I've done in the past year or whatever, talking about like patella tendinopathy and sitting in the back of the car and those fun things like that. But yeah, I guess like, I don't know, this week, right? Like they happen all the time. So what do we do this week? Kathy probably. Yeah, so individual was helping her mother-in-law move and remembers going down the stairs with boxes and thought that that's what was causing knee discomfort. And like we tied into that, we listened to that, we understood that that was probably part of it. But then we found out that when she was driving, the mother-in-law decided or needed to sit in the back seat, almost like a Dwight Schrute style, where that's like the safest spot or whatever. And then she was slammed up forward, so her knee was in a hyperflex position. And we didn't really get to that until she started complaining about her mother-in-law in the car. But then we started to recognize like how that was probably putting the load on her knee. She started to tie into that idea. And then we looked at, we said, okay, next step, like in your office or where you're working, where are things there? Oh, you're also kind of jammed up or underneath because you have extra boxes, I think was what was going on. So now she's in this extra hyperflex position, loading hip flexor, which is probably already a stress response, but then we're also getting our knees bent at greater than 130 degrees underneath us. And now we're having that knee discomfort, and we can go away from it just being carrying the boxes, but the carrying the boxes got us closer to where the real issue might have been. And that's, again, I think, right, that's like the magic, or people are like, oh, wow, how did you get to that thought process? And it's just from asking questions and evaluating and knowing where some of the likelihood ratios can lead you, and then following that path.
Perfect. We do have a question from Craig. How long do you get to spend during evaluations or follow-up visits with your industrial clients?
Yeah, that's definitely a real thing. Oh, sorry. Let me.
That was me, sorry.
No, yeah. Yeah, Craig, great question, right? A real question, real life. Like, how much time do you actually get to talk with someone and sit and listen, and how much is just, get in, get out? I'd like to think in the industrial setting, I feel like we have more time than in other athletic training settings. I try my best to make that time. And if I can't make that time, then I try to reschedule or change some of the things while I give them maybe like the acceptable plan for that time. But then I'm like, okay, well, I'd like to revisit some of this other stuff. So if you do feel crunched for time and you can't go through these with everybody all the time, just right, the same way you make other projects your priority, make that person the priority on Tuesday, and you still have to do the stuff you have to do on Monday, right? I think that's an option or a solution for some of those times when we're not able to tap in. But yeah, I mean, if I'm lost and I keep getting lost, it might take me 30 minutes. It might take me 40 minutes of just talking with someone to get closer to the actual answer. And then sometimes I might not get it in the first 20 minutes or right. And it might take multiple visits, but I think the more you listen and give the space for that person to share, and you tie into some of these, again, likelihood ratios or just ergonomic positions that are out there, you can get closer to the root cause or the answer. I mean, don't give up after the first try, right?
Kind of to tie into that question, how do you personally handle maybe an employee that doesn't want to give you much information? How do you kind of obviously like use your soft skills, but how do you pull some information out of them or use that subjective objective phase?
Yeah, definitely. So you can start with, right, gathering some of these ergonomic likelihood ratios, and you can ask them pointed questions, right? Like, are you straightening your elbow all the way during this task, or are you using an impact gun? Are you right? You can tie into those things specifically and give them yes or no's if they're not able to give you more than that. The other big one that I feel has been helpful for me is like, stop talking at them or stop like headbutting them and turn literally like and figuratively move your body so that you are both facing where the solution is, right? Don't put your arm around them, but almost put your arm around them type thing, and say like, okay, if another person came in with this issue, what do you think they might be doing that could be causing it? And have them be part of the detective, be part of the evaluation or assessment versus like you're scoping them, right? Sometimes people don't like when you just keep drilling them with questions, or they don't like to be the center. So you have to kind of come around them and let them see, okay, if I was going to go help the other 12 people that do your job right now, how could I do that? What are some of the areas that you think might be affecting them? And that might shine the light back on what their actual condition or issue could be.
Awesome. I like that. I'm going to have to implement that. Awesome. Are there any more questions from the audience? Lucas, do you have any more nuggets of information to leave us with? We've collected plenty today, I think, but just in case.
Yeah, no, I think I'm going to go watch Wicked. So thank you for letting me get involved with this and trying to learn some stuff. And please enjoy VNS. Please consider being part of IATS, and just continue to connect with other industrial athletic trainers, because we are probably the future of this, right? And I think we can make it really successful if we work together.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you guys for.
This concludes the IATS On Demand Continuing Education Program video. To claim your CU, you must be a member of the Industrial Athletic Trainers Society and complete the From Claim Your CU found in the YouTube description. If you have any interest in learning more about what the Education Committee has to offer, reach out to the email address on your screen. If you would like to volunteer your time to speak on a topic that interests you, please reach out. Thank you, and stay safe.